Can you beat Diablo 2 if you're locked to a max health of 1? That's what I'm finding out. So if anything touches me, I'm dead meat. I get whacked. Dead. I get shot. Dead. I get too close to the cockroach. Dead. I stand still for too long. Dead. So, when going to pick my hero, I wanted a character that wouldn't have me pulling my brains out. The obvious choice would be to pick the Necro, to get a bunch of skeletons to body block for me, or perhaps the Druid to summon a bunch of wolves, but that kind of goes against the spirit of the challenge, and using a melee character would be pretty much impossible, so I decided to use the Assassin because of some of her nice ranged skills. It would have been pretty cool to do this challenge in hardcore mode, but I'm pretty sure that's basically impossible. But I did impose a rule that whenever I died, I'd be forced to save and quit. This would ensure that I was able to clear each zone to perfection with 1 life instead of repeatedly running in, getting a little damage off, dying, and so on and so on. I had to be a little careful for my first few kills and kite the enemies until I leveled up to level 2, which gave me a skill point that I put into Fire Blast, which gave me the ability to throw a fire potion from distance. Then I headed over to clear out the Den of Evil for an extra skill point and thus more damage. It was going well, but I got a little bit careless, so a fallen walked up to me and my reaction time was super slow and I had my first death. So I saved and quit, but managed to clear it out on my next attempt. One thing that's really different about this challenge is there's tons of stats that don't matter when you're capped at 1 health. Any resistances, replenished life, cannot be frozen, plus to life, and faster hit recovery really do not help you out at all. And I wasn't a melee character, so tons of other stats didn't even apply. So most items I found weren't really helpful. And every time you level up, you get 5 attribute points to put into 5 different stats of your choice. You would normally go with Vitality, but because I can't have more than 1 health, I was jamming all of my points into energy to increase my mana pool to help me spam skills. So I continued through Act 1, but then I got to the underground passage, which was the first challenging zone. The biggest problem being how dark it was down there, so I had much less time to react when pushing forward or turning a corner. There's also a chance for skeleton archers to spawn down there, which is pretty much a death sentence because their arrows are very difficult to see and travel quite fast, so difficult to dodge. And I was getting quite impatient clearing out all the enemies every time I died, so all in all, it took me 13 deaths down here, which I wasn't super proud of, but oh well. Then I had a choice to make. I could continue my way to Andariel, the final boss of the act, or I could take a pit stop and farm a special mini-boss to get runes, which could help power myself up. I tried to farm the mini-boss one time, but I knew it wasn't really a good idea, and as soon as I entered the dungeon, I immediately got swarmed, so I tried to run away but accidentally clicked a barrel, and for whatever reason, the developers thought it would be a good idea if barrels had a chance to explode when you click them. Real funny. My Fire Blast skill was kind of tedious to use and didn't have a very good area of effect, so I ran around leveling my character in the open fields, and after a few more deaths, I reached level 12, which unlocked the Wake of Fire skill. So instead of me trying to kite enemies by throwing a potion, running a bit, then throwing another potion, I could cast this around a corner and take cover while it would set the entire floor ablaze. Now I was ready to fight Andariel, but I still had to get my way through all 3 layers of the barracks and 3 layers of the catacombs to get through. Thankfully, my Wake of Fire skill destroyed the enemies, but I did get careless a little bit too often, and these were some pretty big zones in between the waypoints, so every time I died, I got sent back a good ways. So by the time I got through all these zones, I was up to a total of 34 deaths, and now it's time to face the first act boss. Thankfully, Andariel has a natural negative 50% fire res, which is what I deal, so she got wiped out in a couple of seconds, and luckily she even gave me some Gorefoot boots, which have a 20% faster run walk on them, which is super helpful to help evade stuff. So all in all, I ended Act 1 with 34 deaths, which was a lot more than I was originally expecting, but now I was on to Act 2. For the first few areas, I tried to run past most of the enemies because their attacks weren't too hard to dodge, and I only got another 2 deaths, one of which I still don't know what killed me. But then I had to go into the Halls of the Dead to retrieve the Rubik's Cube. Although there aren't any archers in Act 2, there are slingers, and monster density is quite high down there, so I died quite a few times just from opening a door and immediately getting impaled from inside the door I just opened. And I would have to restart the entire dungeon again looking for the cube. So by the time I finally found it, I was up to 44 deaths. Not looking too good. But then I was on to another awful zone, the Maggot Lair, where I needed to retrieve the Staff of Kings. Down here you have barely any room to walk around, and one of the main enemies spawns lightning bolts every time they take damage. So I had to take it brutally slow and slowly place my traps as far as I could around the corners to try and avoid the lightning bolts. But after another 7 deaths, I finally cleared my way through all 3 layers and got the Staff of Kings. The last piece I needed was the Amulet Viper, which is found in the Claw Viper Temple, but all the enemies down there were pushovers, so I cleared out without any more deaths. Next up was the Arcane Sanctuary. The 2 problems with this area were the Ghoul Lords, which can cast a wall of fire directly under my feet, instantly killing me. Not very fair. And lightning spires that fire pretty fast lightning that can be tricky to dodge with limited area to move around. So this area claimed my life 8 more times before I found the portal to take me to the Act Box. But first I had one more dungeon to clear out, and this stunk. Talrosh's tomb is massive, and I didn't find the entrance to Talrosh's tomb until I explored basically the entire dungeon. So I died another 8 times here before I found it. So I combined the Staff of Kings and the amulet in the Roger Q and put the staff on the orifice to open his tomb. And now we were on to fight Duriel. This was the part I was most worried about when thinking if this challenge was even possible. But to give myself the best chance, I hired a mercenary to hopefully stall him so I could cast my fire trap. So I headed in, and as soon as he got too close to me, I immediately died because of his Holy Freeze aura. So I tried again, and this time I was able to run circles around him without him killing me, but I also wasn't dealing any damage to him, and as soon as I tried to cast my Wake of Fire, he caught up to me and slayed me. The size of the arena combined with Duriel's Holy Freeze aura, this was not going to be fun. I tried again, but the results were even worse. But on my next try, on the way to fight him, a random mob dropped me a tier rune, and I already had a staff stashed away that had 2 open sockets on it, and I already had a Ral rune. So I put the runes in the staff and made a leaf rune word, which gave me +3 to fire skills, increasing my damage from 43 to 50 to 56 to 63. So I tried Duriel again, and instantly died. I kept trying with no success, but on my way to Duriel on another attempt, I also found a Tal rune, so I was able to make the stealth rune root in an armor. Most of the stats on this are irrelevant, but it does have 25% faster run walk on it, and on the next attempt, this happened. For whatever reason, Duriel finally decided to target my mercenary, but I didn't have enough potions to keep him alive, but on the next attempt, this happened. Okay, we got it again. And I finished Act 2 with a total death count of 84. Act 3 was pretty straightforward, and most of the enemy's attacks were pretty easy to avoid. I just took it as slow as my patience would allow me, which was not enough most of the time, and placed my sentries at the edge of my screen to dispatch the enemies before they became a threat. I eventually gathered all 3 organs and worked my way towards Travancore, and when slaying one of the council members, they dropped me an Angelic Wings amulet, which is basically useless on a normal playthrough without the other pieces of the set, but the +3 to light radius was actually pretty nice, allowing me to see enemies slightly sooner when in dungeons to give me a little bit more time to react. And there's already time to clear out Mephisto. I just used the classic moat trick where he's not able to attack you, so I just cast my fire traps on the other side of the moat, and he died. And this was my best act so far with only another 25 deaths. I really felt like I was getting in the groove at this point, so going into Act 4 I was feeling pretty good. And I was up to level 26, so I was doing really good damage, so I surgically moved my way through the enemies and only had 2 more deaths on my way to the Chaos Sanctuary, where I would need to fight Diablo. Then somehow I managed to clear out the entire sanctuary on my first try, until it was just me and Diablo. But in the last moment, he killed me. But my traps were still up and shooting, and just before they expired, they managed to kill him, finishing off Act 4. This is by far the shortest act, but still, only 3 deaths felt amazing. But little did I know that Act 5 was going to break me. In the starting areas, I had a few annoying deaths from catapults dropping stuff on my head, and there's also a few times I died when I had no clue what killed me. And one thing that was kinda interesting, even though I was in Act 5 and level 28, I was still running out of stamina. You normally would get tons of stamina from putting stat points into vitality, but because I couldn't have more than 1 health, I didn't put any points into it. So I was still having to drink stamina potions, which isn't a huge deal, but I found it kind of funny. And eventually I got to the Ancient's Way, cleared out the 3 bosses, and worked my way through the 3 levels of the Worldstone Keep. The first wave in the Throne of Destruction has a fire immune enemy, so I hired a mercenary to handle him. Clearing out the rest of the waves wasn't too challenging because I could just stack up a bunch of sentries, hide, and as soon as they spawned, they'd be incinerated. But But as for the Baal fight, I really didn't think it was going to be a problem, but I couldn't be more wrong. Baal has 6 different attacks that he can perform. His melee attack and mana burn attack aren't really an issue, but everything else is. He can shoot a wave of ice that is pretty hard to dodge if you aren't positioned right. He can summon a copy of himself, which basically doubles the attacks I have to dodge. Incineration Nova that summons a ring of death that rapidly expands. And normally he curses you with a defense curse, which reduces your defense by 60%, which isn't that big of a deal. But if you have more mana than health, he will curse you with blood mana. That makes it so every time you cast any spell, it reduces your health by however much that spell cost to cast. But thankfully the game doesn't allow you to kill yourself by accidentally casting a spell while this is active. But every time I got cursed with this, I had to go back into town to cure myself so I could cast my sentries again. And lastly, he can summon festering appendages right on top of me, and if I'm not already moving, I'm toast. My first Baal attempt, I was constantly getting cursed, so I had to keep going back into town to remove it, and when I was finally able to place some traps, he spawned his tentacles right on my head and I died. The big problem being that every time I died, I had to go through all the World Stone Keep level 2 and 3, clear out the throne room, and clear out all 5 waves without taking any damage before I even got another chance at Baal. The next 2 times I got to Baal ended the same way with the tentacles killing me, and the next 2 attempts after that I was starting to get a little bit better at dodging his attacks, but they ended after he summoned a clone and destroyed me. But through all these failed runs, I was getting loads of experience from clearing out the throne room so many times. So I was at level 39, which is extremely over leveled at this point, so my damage was doing pretty solid. I eventually got into another 1v1 with Baal, but this time I had a little bit different strategy. Instead of me trying to stay as far away from him as possible to avoid his attacks, I got a little bit closer to him because it seemed like when I was closer he was less likely to curse me or spawn his festering appendages, which caused a lot of deaths before. And the results were showing. From me last time, he has a tiny bit of health left. He sends out another blue wave of death. And there's a wrap right there. 12 hours and 36 minutes. Not terrible. I was expecting it to take a couple less hours. This last fight took a lot longer than it really should have. So overall, this was actually pretty fun, and there was quite a few things I didn't expect. One thing was the gear. The fact that plus to stamina and light radius were things I actually cared about was pretty cool. And actually made some items that would normally be completely garbage pretty sweet to find. If you'd like me to continue this challenge through hell difficulty, let me know.